Three people supported my firing: my sister, my boss, and my so-called best friend, without realizing that I secretly owned the entire company they worked for. They grinned as they took away my ID badge, treating me like trash to be thrown out. I didn't say anything, just stared at them, keeping a smile to myself because they didn't realize that they had just fired their real owner. If you've ever been undervalued, betrayed, or ridiculed, this story will hit you hard. Please share and subscribe because this retaliation will leave you feeling 6 months ago, I was just Mike, the guy who fixed broken printers and got no respect, and people used to forget that I was there, even when I was the one keeping the business afloat. My sister Ashley joined the company, and she became close to the CEO's son. I was abruptly excluded from meetings, emails were inadvertently lost, projects I started were turned over to other teams, and the last straw was a fictitious complaint that Ashley filed, alleging I had misused corporate. She was my sister, and she simply cost me everything I had built, or so they believed, because 5 years ago, while they were busy playing office politics, I had started a silent venture with a shell company using my tech skills to develop cybersecurity tools. That shell company slowly started acquiring shares of this very company, and I kept everything hidden behind. The HR manager, who I later discovered was her college friend, handed me a termination letter with a fake smile, business names, and proxies. Ashley was the only one who knew, and I signed the last contract a week before I was fired. The shell company owned 72% of their company, but I kept quiet because I wanted to see who would stab me first, and she did it right in the back. I left that day looking like a loser, with everyone watching me and whispering behind my back, but I wasn't even close to finished. They hosted a huge party at the company to celebrate the new leadership 2 days after I was fired, and Ashley arrived looking like she owned the place in a $4,000 outfit. My former best friend Ashley was perplexed as to why the board was calling a meeting without first consulting me. Todd said, "Perhaps it's about your promotion. You're about to be officially named CDO." They were laughing, toasting, and discussing new beginnings as Todd stood next to her, holding champagne as if he hadn't just stabbed me in the back. However, they were unaware that I had already scheduled a mandatory board meeting for that evening under my real name at precisely 7:01 p.m. She smiled, but that smile wouldn't last. The boardroom was silent when I walked in. Ashley's jaw dropped. Todd's glass nearly slipped from his hand, and the CEO, our uncle, squinted and asked, "Mike, what the heck are you doing here?" I seated myself quietly at the head of the table and then handed the board's lawyer a file, saying, "These are the ownership documents. You might want to read them aloud." The attorney was perplexed until he turned the page, and then his eyes, "This can be correct," widened. Ashley murmured, "This is a joke, right? He's just an IT guy." And the audience fell silent. This document shows that a holding company named Synod Global now holds majority shares of the firm. He turned to face me, "And according to these documents, you are set as the sole owner." I looked at her and said, "Correction, I used to be your ID specialist, and now I'm the reason you get paid." The CEO stood up in rage, saying, "You manipulated us. You went behind our backs." The board members started muttering among themselves, and everyone was paralyzed. "No, I played the same game you taught me." I leaned forward. "You never imagined the loser could defeat you at it." I sat there quietly, letting the silence do the damage. Every second that went by served as a reminder that they had just given power to the one person they attempted to destroy. One of the board members, Mr. Clark, cleared his throat. "Mike, are you telling us I was buying the company one piece at a time?" And Ashley slammed her hand on the table. "This is crazy. You were just a background guy who didn't even have the courage to speak up in meetings. How could you do all this?" I looked directly at her because I didn't waste time playing office games while you were chasing titles. Instead, I was building an empire. The board lawyer verified that everything was legal, valid, and irreversible, and then I dropped the second bomb: the following executives are being fired for unethical behavior. I'm not here to simply control the business. I'm here to implement changes that will take effect right away. I passed another folder across the table that contained emails, transactions, and falsified reports. Ashley's name was on the top, so she grabbed the folder, frantically flipped through it, and yelled, "You're doing this because you're jealous because I got ahead." "No," I answered, slowly getting to my feet. "I'm doing this because you're a liability to this company and because you betrayed me." Todd jumped in, perspiring. "Come on, Mike. We're friends. Don't do this." I went to him and spoke in a calm but firm tone. "Friends don't sell each other out for a swift promotion. You could have left, but you joined them instead." He didn't say anything else, and the board had no other option. In a matter of minutes, I had them removed from their positions due to my ownership percentage, but I wasn't finished. I took out 3 sealed letters from my folder and presented them to Ashley, Todd, and my uncle. "Take these as your last severance pay included in paychecks." Ashley's voice cracked. "And you're officially out." I looked her in the eyes. "And you dismissed me to protect yourself. Now, I'm just giving back the favor." I thought it, but I had no idea how far they were. I left the boardroom with everyone watching me, but as I got to the door, I stopped and said, "One last thing. Oh, and that company retreat in Bali is still happening next month, just without you." Ready to go and ruin 3 days later, I began getting odd calls with no one answering and only quiet, followed by anonymous threats and emails. I ignored the phony lawsuits and absurd allegations of corporate fraud at first, assuming it was just noise. However, after someone broke into my condo, nothing was taken, but my laptop had open files and a message. I looked at the security footage and saw that someone had used my old keycard, the same one I had used when I was the IT guy, and there were only 2 people left with access to that keycard system. Ashley and I knew Todd was responsible, but I had no idea how desperate they had become. After I fired them, Ashley attempted to start her own tech company using company files that had been stolen, but when investors checked her background, they discovered the scandal, and no one wanted to work with her. She was blacklisted, and Todd crawled back to a competitor, pleading for a job, but somehow, every company already knew what he had done and assumed I had leaked it. I hadn't said a word, and they were falling hard and blaming me for everything. At the company's annual shareholder meeting, they devised a last-ditch plan to destroy me. My first plan involved the majority owner, and everything went flawlessly. The presentation, the profits, the numbers, until I walked onto the stage. However, as soon as I did, someone shouted from the back, "Mike Williams is a fraud. He stole this company." Ashley appeared among hundreds of shareholders, board members, and members of the press. She waved and held a huge file in her hand. "The document proves that Mike's holding company used stolen software and fake shell companies. He doesn't own this firm legally." The room fell silent, and everyone turned to face me. If I made one mistake, I could lose everything I've worked so hard to build: my reputation, my business, everything. The moderator turned to face me and asked, "Mr. Williams, do you have a response?" I smiled and said, "I was hoping you'd show up today, Ashley, because I brought something too." As I moved calmly to the microphone, Ashley had bribed a former employee to fabricate documents, and I had allowed it to happen. I had put a phony file in the system weeks prior, labeled ownership vulnerability, and she fell for it. I played a brief audio clip, and her voice was very clear. "If we leak this, it'll ruin him. It doesn't matter if it's real. By the time he proves it's fake, the damage will be done." The moderator stood stunned as the room erupted in gasps, and one board member muttered, "Oh my God." I went back to Ashley said, "You taught me how to play dirty. I just got better at it." Security escorted her out. This company was built on silence, betrayal, and politics, but from today forward it will stand for something better, I said as the audience applauded. However, just as I thought the game was over, a letter from someone I hadn't heard from in 15 years arrived at my desk. The following morning, the envelope contained only my office address and a gold embossed seal that I hadn't seen in over 10 years. I opened it slowly and found a single handwritten letter inside. "We know who actually funded Synod Global, so you're not the only ghost in this story." Let's meet Daniel Carter, my former business partner. I thought he had died in a car accident 15 years ago, but if he was still alive, It meant that everything I built wasn't just mine. When I first started coding day and night, he was brilliant but unstable and greedy. He wanted shortcuts rather than strategy, and he wanted us to sell our code to a foreign entity. One investor with significant warning signs, he said, "Long time, Mike," emerging from the shadows. "I thought you were dead," I replied. He laughed almost, but it was seeing you take the company solo that gave me a reason to return. I refused. And then the accident happened. His car went off a bridge, and his body was never found. I moved on to the build set alone, or so I thought I did, following the directions in the letter. He was in an empty warehouse on the outskirts of the city at midnight, and threw it in my direction. I asked for proof that your entire shell company was seed funded through an account I set up, meaning that legally I own 49% of it. He interrupted, smiling, and said, "Now I want half the profits and half the power, or I leak everything to the board, the media, your investors, everyone." It felt like the floor dropped beneath me. I had just taken down my enemy's exposed betrayal, rebuilt my name from dust, and now the ghost of my past had returned to reclaim half my empire. His smile faded as I looked at him calmly and said, "You didn't come back for power. You came back because you're broke. If you were doing well, you wouldn't have waited 15 years. And that flash drive is a bluff. You used a deceased man's account, and I used it to bury you lawfully. You don't own 49% of anything. You're just a ghost." His eyes widened as he stepped forward, his voice low, and he wanted to bet. I handed him a folder, and I already knew. "You were alive because I've been tracking the offshore account you used to fund the set, and I bought it 6 months ago." As he was being led out, I stood there breathing deeply, realizing that although I had no family or friends left from the old world, I had peace, which was invaluable. Back at my office, I hung a new frame that read, "They fired me, but I owned everything they worked for." Daniel backed away when I said, "You set me up, but I finished a story." Because sometimes retaliation isn't loud, it's just permanent. I put another line underneath it and buried them as well when the ghost returned.